never imagined that one phone call could unravel her life. She was logical, a soon-to-be college graduate with a love for mysteries and a circle of close friends who shared her fascination for all things eerie. It began as a rumor on an obscure forum about a demonic phone call that targeted unsuspecting people, each forced to face a personal trial of horrifying proportions. The rumor's subject line read, "Don't answer if it rings after midnight." Melina thought it sounded like typical creepypasta material, spooky text about a cursed phone line. Yet she couldn't resist the possibility of a hidden truth behind these bizarre claims. Her friends teased each other about fear chasing, calling them an amateur Scooby-Doo gang. All in good fun. Until someone found a specific urban legend referencing a survival challenge that triggered only if a group of people collectively accepted the phone's ring. That piqued Melina's interest, an alleged ritual that turned a normal phone call into a gateway for a test of courage. She half laughed at the notion, but the story stayed lodged in her thoughts. The phone call rumor apparently originated from a neglected telephone booth in a deserted corner of Greenwood Park, or sometimes from an unlisted cell phone number that rang at midnight. The story varied across websites. Yet the core premise remained: if you answered that call with friends present, each person would be assigned a personal challenge, ironically tailored to their worst fears, regrets, or secrets. The legend insisted not everyone survived. It sounded laughable, like a dark campfire fable, yet a faint shimmer of real dread lingered in the back of Melina's mind. Her friend group, Chris, Eva, Joel, Marco, and Layla, shared that curiosity. They joked about investigating local supernatural lore for thrills. This phone challenge, or Thatch Tucson Ton in rumor circles, seemed like the perfect, if twisted, group project. Before they knew it, the six of them agreed to test the legend one weekend, treating it like an extreme dare. They picked a neutral location, Melina's apartment, and declared that if a phone rang at midnight under the invocation rules they'd read online, they'd answer collectively. Even if the phone didn't ring, the attempt would be a fun story. None realized just how dangerously real it would become. They gathered on a Friday night in Melina's compact living room. She'd cleared furniture to give them space to sit in a circle on the floor, placing a single cordless landline phone, connected for emergencies, on a low table in the middle. Joel insisted on a landline to stay true to the old-school urban legend vibe. Eva smirked, saying if they messed with a cell phone, it wouldn't feel the same. The instructions gleaned from the rumor were bizarre. The group should power off all unnecessary electronics, dim the lights, and recite a phrase 3 times at precisely 11:58 p.m., supposedly inviting the phone to ring at midnight with the challenge. If the phone didn't ring, that would be that. If it did, they must answer on speaker, all present, and collectively accept the challenge. The rumor claimed rejecting it after picking up would lead to dire consequences anyway. Layla found the instructions comedic, but a flicker of tension lined her voice. "We're basically summoning a phone call from some demon. Are we sure we want to do this?" Chris brushed it off, half laughing. "Come on. It's just a silly ritual. Let's do it. Record everything, and we'll have a crazy story to tell." Melina felt both excitement and apprehension. She set up a camera on a tripod to capture the moment, though they doubted anything dramatic would happen. At 11:58 p.m., the group formed a loose circle around the table. The lamp overhead was the only light, casting elongated shadows on the walls. Joel glanced at his watch, nodding for them to start. Melina cleared her throat, reading the phrase from her notes in a steady voice, "To the watchers beyond and the line that crosses midnight, we ask for the call. Let us face the challenge." The group repeated it in unison 3 times, feeling vaguely foolish. Then silence. They sat exchanging half-embarrassed smiles, waiting, 11:59 p.m. ticked by. The hush in the apartment grew thick. Even the night's usual city noise seemed distant. Their eyes drifted between the clock on the wall and the phone on the table. The second hand marched toward midnight. A final beep from the clock signaled 12 o'clock. Hearts pounded, but no immediate ring. Relief flooded some of them. Another half-minute passed in anticlimax. Then, abruptly, the phone rang, a jarring, shrill tone echoing in the hush. They froze, wide-eyed. The phone kept ringing, each ring a spike of tension. Eventually, Eva mustered the nerve. Glancing at the others, "We all said we'd do this, right?" She reached out, pressing the speaker button so the entire group could hear. Instantly, static hissed, followed by a distant voice, unplaceable in age or gender. Quiet yet resonant. "You have chosen to receive the survival challenge. Do you accept?" The question sent chills through them. Chris, a habitual joker, swallowed hard. The vow was that the group would accept collectively. So Chris answered, "Yes, we accept." The voice responded with a low, almost satisfied hum. 6 participants, 6 trials. Each must succeed or forfeit the cost. Listen to your instructions carefully. The challenge begins at dawn. You will each face a test alone within the next 24 hours. Tell no one outside your group. Breaking secrecy invites a greater penalty. The line crackled, then cut abruptly. The phone beeped, returning to normal dial tone. They stared at each other, hearts pounding. A swirl of emotions, fear, thrill, disbelief. "What the hell was that?" Joel asked, voice unsteady. Melina tried to rationalize it, maybe a friend pranking them. But the phone had no caller ID, and the voice was too unnatural. Something about its measured tone screamed not a hoax. Unsure what to do next, they ended up letting the tension settle, concluding the ritual was done. Chris insisted it might still be a grand prank, a trick by some hacker. Layla said they should stay together overnight. They agreed, sleeping huddled in the living room, half expecting more instructions. But the phone remained silent. By morning, they parted ways, each uneasy about what 6 trials might entail. The challenge apparently wasn't over. Chris, a confident soccer player and all-around risk-taker, left Melina's place still unconvinced about the call's authenticity. He reasoned if something haunted was going to test them, it'd show up soon. That afternoon, he prepared to meet friends at the park. On the way, his phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "Your trial awaits at Redwood Playground. Arrive alone." The words sank his stomach. Redwood Playground was a rundown spot near old warehouse blocks, known for abandoned swings. Curiosity overcame him. Maybe this was the test? He texted the group, "I got a weird text about Redwood Playground. Someone's messing with me." He half expected them to say it was a joke, but Melina only responded, "Be careful." We all accepted the challenge. Slightly rattled, Chris decided to check Redwood Playground to prove it was nothing. The playground at 5 p.m. was deserted, rusted swings creaking in the breeze. The sun hovered low, painting everything in a golden haze. Chris felt an odd hush. He paced around, seeing no sign of a test. Then, faintly, he heard a child's laughter behind the old slide. He approached, finding no one. Another laugh echoed from the swings. He glanced over, one swing moved on its own, slow and rhythmic. The sound unsettled him. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. "Trial begins. Enter the slide and face your fear." The message had no sender ID. Heart pounding, Chris realized this must be the supernatural test. His personal fear? He racked his brain. He'd had nightmares of tight, enclosed spaces. The slide was a narrow tube, half collapsed. He recalled being trapped in a trunk as a child. The idea of crawling through a dark tube terrified him. "This is crazy," he muttered, yet felt compelled. If he refused, what penalty might follow? He crawled into the slide's opening, forcing himself deeper. The interior smelled stale, full of leaves. Halfway, the tube seemed to stretch unnaturally, darkness swallowing the exit. He tried to back out, but found the route behind blocked by a swirl of shadows. Panic rose. He pressed forward in a near crawl, each inch a fight against claustrophobia. The air turned frigid. He felt something brush past him, a phantom child's hand. Fear overcame him, but he kept pushing, tears stinging his eyes. Suddenly, he emerged from the other end, onto the playground again. The sun was setting. No more than a minute or two had passed, but he felt as if he'd been crawling for an hour. His phone buzzed. Trial completed. Survive the next or forfeit. Gasping, he realized his clothes were soaked in sweat. He sprinted to his car. Mind spinning, the challenge was real. If each friend faced such a terrifying personal trial, who knew what horrors awaited them all? That evening, they regrouped at Melina's apartment. Chris recounted his ordeal, voice shaking. The group no longer doubted the phone call. Dex teased he'd do better in his trial, but fear sharpened everyone's edges. Sure enough, the next day, it was Eva's turn. A text arrived at noon. "Eva's trial is ready. Abandoned mall rooftop. Midnight." Eva turned pale, recalling how she hated mirrors. She once had recurring nightmares about her reflection twisting into a sinister double. Despite the terror, she couldn't ignore the summons. The group insisted on accompanying her, but the text said arrive alone. That night, at 11:30 p.m., they parted ways. Eva drove to the old Redwood Mall, shuttered for years after the economy tanked. The front gate was locked, forcing her to climb a side fence. The interior was a labyrinth of empty shops and crumbling tiles. She found the escalators leading to the roof. A sign read no access, but she pressed on, flashlight in hand. Midnight approached. The phone beeped. Enter the service stairwell. Face the reflection. She discovered a corridor with large, broken mirror panels propped against the walls. The air felt stale, a lingering smell of dust and mold. She recalled her phobia of seeing demonic versions of herself in mirrors. She swallowed her dread, stepping carefully. Her reflection multiplied, each mirror reflecting infinite versions of her in the gloom. Suddenly, lightning flickered outside through a shattered skylight, and in one mirror, Eva's reflection parted from her actual movements. She froze. The reflection turned to face her directly, grinning. Her real body had not moved. "Oh God," she whispered. The reflection raised a finger, beckoning. She tried to back away, but every mirror repeated the reflection's menacing posture. Then her phone beeped. "Your fear is the mirror's occupant. Face it or let it claim you." Heartbeat hammering, she forced herself to approach the central mirror. The reflection's grin widened unnaturally, eyes blackening. She realized to break the illusion, she must physically touch the glass. Reclaiming her reflection, summoning all courage, she lunged forward, pressing her palm to the mirror. The reflection's face contorted, a silent scream behind the glass. The mirror cracked with a jagged line. Thunder boomed. The overhead light flickered. She felt a shock course through her. Then it all stilled. The reflection returned to normal, copying her movements. She stumbled back, panting. Her phone beeped again, trial completed. She sobbed with relief, scrambled down the escalators, and drove off, tears streaming. Each challenge forced them to confront a core fear in a bizarre, supernatural setup. The group realized these trials escalated in danger. Who would be next? A day later, Joel's text arrived at dawn. Joel's trial awaits. Sewage tunnels under Pine Street. Midnight. This spelled horror for him. Joel harbored a deep fear of the underground. He was claustrophobic about tunnels and also squeamish about filth. With no alternative, he prepared. The group insisted he call them if possible, but the instructions demanded he go alone. If they broke the rules, the penalty might escalate. At midnight, drizzling rain pelted the city. Joel found the sealed manhole behind an abandoned building on Pine Street. He pried it open with a crowbar. Heart pounding, the stench of sewage rose, gagging him. The phone beeped, enter. Follow the flow until the labyrinth. Survive or fail. He cursed under his breath, climbing down the ladder into the dark, putrid space. Water trickled around his ankles. Guided by flashlight, he followed the rancid stream through narrow tunnels, the air thick with stagnant rot. Each step echoed ominously. Suddenly, at a junction, the flashlight revealed a corridor that shouldn't exist, brick walls forming an archway into deeper darkness. He realized this must be the labyrinth, an impossible extension. The hush pressed in. He advanced, each breath a struggle not to vomit. He was convinced the environment was warping around him. A supernatural sewer space. Then he heard a splash behind him. Swinging the beam, he glimpsed a slithering shape submerging in the murky water. Impossibly large. The phone beeped, you fear being devoured in the dark. Face it or drown in terror. His pulses hammered. The water level rose around his calves, as if the system was flooding. He pressed forward, ignoring the vile stench, clinging to the faint hope of an exit. Another swirl of movement behind him. Something brushed his leg. He screamed, thrashing, mustering will. He recalled the others had triumphed by confronting the illusions. He forced himself to stand firm, shining the flashlight on the water. Nothing except swirling filth. The hush abated. The water receded slightly. A rung ladder became visible at the tunnel's end. He climbed, ignoring the slime on his arms. Reaching the top, he found a half-collapsed exit leading to the city street. As he emerged, his phone beeped, trial completed. He collapsed, retching in relief. Another challenge. Another near brush with horror. He texted the group a single word, survived. By now, the group realized each member would be targeted in a custom fear scenario. Melina's anxiety grew, as her own challenge hadn't arrived yet. Nor had Dex's or Layla's. That evening, though, Marisol's phone chimed. Marisol, the challenge calls you to Maple Hills Cemetery. Midnight. A wave of dread overcame her. She carried a deep fear of being buried alive or trapped in coffins. The idea of facing it in a cemetery at night felt monstrous. At midnight, Marisol stood outside Maple Hills Cemetery's rusted gates. The phone beeped, enter the caretaker's mausoleum to begin. She found the caretaker's small stone building near the center, half hidden by overgrown ivy. Inside, old funeral equipment lay strewn about, plus a rotten wooden coffin leaning against the wall. The hush soared. Her phone beeped again, your fear, the confined tomb. Get inside, or forfeit your life. Trembling, she approached the coffin, stench of decay clinging to the air. She recalled nightmares of being locked in a coffin, suffocating in darkness. But the note implied no alternative. She prayed for strength, prying open the coffin's lid. It was empty, lined with moldy fabric. Summoning nerve. She climbed in. The hush thickened. The lid slammed shut on its own. Darkness absolute. She panicked, screaming, scratching the wood. The phone beeped. Somehow audible in the coffin, confront your dread. Do not flee. She forced her breathing to slow. Repeated a mantra, it's not real. I can do this. But the coffin lurched, as if carried by invisible pallbearers. She felt every muscle tense. Then a horrifying sensation of being lowered. The coffin scraping stone walls, presumably into a crypt or underground. She pounded the lid, but it was stuck. Her air felt limited, her mind swirling. She hammered again. Gradually, the coffin stilled. A faint glow emanated from a crack in the lid, summoning final courage. She shoved upward. It gave way. She found herself back in the mausoleum. Coffin upright. The door opened to the night. Her phone beeped, trial completed. She fled, tears streaming. The caretaker's mausoleum behind her looked normal, but she knew she'd experienced something beyond normal reality. Dex, the group's steady comedic presence, waited anxiously for his text. It arrived at noon the next day. Dex, your test awaits at the old bridge. Midnight. The phone will ring. Dex's hidden fear was losing control over moral choices. He carried guilt for a betrayal in his past. Having blamed a friend for an accident, he dreaded facing that scenario again. Now the challenge threatened a moral dilemma, presumably on that old, half-collapsed bridge outside town. At midnight, Dex arrived. Storm clouds loomed overhead as he stepped onto the rickety wooden span. Halfway across, the phone beeped, welcome. Dex, choose who must fall. Accept blame or pass it on. The hush rose. Thunder rumbled. Dex's light revealed illusions on the bridge, two silhouettes lying near the railing, each moaning. They resembled close friends from his past, including the friend he'd once blamed. The illusions each pleaded for help, claiming the other was the cause of an accident. Tears welled in Dex's eyes as old guilt flared. The phone beeped, save one. Condemn the other. Or the water claims you both. He realized it was forcing him to either replicate or rectify his past betrayal. This time, Dex refused to shift blame, deciding to take responsibility. He rushed to the illusions, ignoring their pleas to name the other as guilty. He stood between them, shouting, I won't choose. I blame only myself. The hush peaked, the illusions shrieking. The entire bridge shook, boards cracking. A final beep, you have chosen self-accountability. The water spares you. The illusions dissolved. The hush parted. Dex nearly collapsed in relief. The phone read, trial completed. He left the bridge, sobbing from the emotional strain. He texted the group, I survived. My trial's done, only half believing it. The tension soared as only two more participants, Layla and Melina, remained untested. Layla dreaded her phone beep all day. By dusk, it arrived. Layla, your fear awaits at Halcyon Mall's basement. Midnight. She'd once confided to them her greatest horror was being lost in labyrinthine spaces with no way out, particularly haunted or cursed labyrinths. Now it seemed she must face exactly that. The group had to let her go alone, but they texted well wishes. She mustered strength, heading to the shuttered Halcyon Mall by 11:30 p.m. Inside, the basement lay behind locked doors. She pried a side entrance, descending stale-smelling concrete steps. Her phone beeped, enter the sublevel. Find the marked exit. If you fail, remain lost forever. Cold sweat trickled down her neck. The corridor branched in multiple directions, each unlit, each reeking of mildew. She progressed, leaving chalk marks at intersections. But each hallway looked identical. A swirl of graffiti and crates. Sometimes her flashlight caught fleeting silhouettes crossing her path. But each corner was empty upon arrival. Panicked, she realized her chalk marks vanished behind her. She was stuck in a shifting labyrinth. The hush pressed, illusions flickering in the distance. Her phone beeped, face your labyrinth. Conquer your panic. She forced herself to calm, ignoring illusions of endless corridors. She recalled a childhood strategy, keep one hand on the wall. She methodically followed the perimeter. Each time illusions tried to lure her off route, she resisted. After an indeterminable time, maybe an hour, she found a rusted door labeled exit in chipped paint. She tested it. Door squealing open onto the outside loading dock. The hush receded. Her phone beeped, trial completed. She collapsed. Tears of relief. She'd survived her personal labyrinth. At last, it was down to Melina, the one who originally proposed investigating the phone call rumor. She dreaded her text each hour. Near twilight, it arrived. Melina, your test at your family's old farmland. Midnight, the phone will ring. She swallowed hard. The farmland was where her mother died years ago in a tragic accident with heavy machinery. She carried deep guilt, believing she'd been inattentive that day. The text implied a final confrontation with her own nightmares. Close to midnight, she arrived at the farmland's rusted gate. Farmland mostly sold off except for a decaying barn and a patch of field. The phone beeped, enter the barn. Face the moment you dread. She stepped inside. The overhead beams creaking. The smell of hay and old motor oil thick. Her flashlight revealed a large tractor and combine harvester, both long defunct, covered in dust. She recalled how her mother died in a tragic mishap with the combine. Her chest tightened. Thunder rumbled outside as if nature sensed her turmoil. Then an impossible scene manifested. The combine's engine roared to life. Lights flickering. A ghostly figure stood in the operator's seat, resembling her mother. The hush soared, the figure turning to Melina with sadness in her eyes. Why did you let me go? The figure mouthed, though no real voice emerged. Tears streamed down Melina's cheeks. I was just a kid. I didn't know. I'm so sorry. The hush pressed. The figure's expression twisted with sorrow and accusation. The combine lurched forward, heading straight for Melina. A monstrous mechanical grind. She tried to run, but the hush slowed her. She realized to break free, she must overcome her guilt. She stood firm, arms out, shouting, I was a child. It wasn't my fault. I loved you. The combine screeched to a halt, the mother figure fading, the hush loosening its grip. The overhead lamp in the barn sputtered. The phone beeped in her pocket, trial completed. She collapsed, sobbing. The illusion's gone. All 6 friends had faced their trials, some had succeeded. The group reunited the next day, battered but alive. Except Chris noticed a horrifying detail, one of them was missing. They realized with mounting dread that the missing friend was Joel. But didn't Joel survive his tunnel trial? He'd texted survived. Checking his phone, they found no sign of him. Searching his apartment, the door was open. Lights off. Phone on the couch. A single note read, "They're not done with me." Frantically, they realized Joel must have received a second trial or a penalty for some reason. The phone's text about 6 participants. 6 trials might have implied each only got one. But perhaps Joel somehow triggered a follow-up test. The group scoured his last known location. No leads. The hush overshadowed them, as if the entity behind the challenge claimed one final victim. Dex recalled Joel's final call for help, about seeing a shape in the tunnel. Now it seemed Joel's ordeal wasn't fully resolved. They concluded Joel might have broken a rule or attempted to confide in someone outside the group. The consequence: disappearance. Melina, heart heavy, realized not everyone emerges unscathed from these curses. She felt the phone in her pocket as though it weighed a ton. They'd completed the trials, but the rumor said not all survive. They parted ways, each subdued by grief. Another friend lost, swallowed by some unstoppable supernatural force that orchestrated these personal horrors. Days passed. The group struggled to return to normal. Dex insisted the phone calls ended. The entity appeased, but Melina suspected otherwise. One twilight, as she dozed on her sofa, her phone rang. She answered, half expecting normal spam. Instead, static hissed. Then a voice, Joel's voice, trembling, said, "I'm stuck in the tunnel again. I failed. Please help me." She froze, paralyzed by heartbreak. "Joel? Where? How?" The hush rose on the line. The voice repeated, "I didn't finish. They took me. I can't see the exit. It's so dark." She stammered, tears welling. "Where are you?" The voice only repeated, help me, then silence. The line cut. She realized with a fresh wave of horror that Joel, or his spirit, was calling from beyond. Just like the warnings in the legend, the challenge had claimed him. The phone beeped with a final text, one friend lost. Fear never truly ends. She let the phone drop from her hand. The entire story came full circle, a cursed phone call that demanded personal trials. Each overcame their illusions except Joel, who presumably messed up or tried seeking outside help. Now he was another lost soul feeding the rumors cycle. She realized the challenge was unstoppable, traveling from phone to phone, luring curious people with the promise of a survival test, some winning, some losing. The hush-laden illusions each overcame were mere preludes to future torment. In the gloom of her living room, she whispered a prayer for Joel's soul. Then the phone rang again, the same static. She did not answer. Instead, she sobbed as it rang out, echoing in the hush. She understood that the rumors about a demonic phone call once unleashed could never be fully contained, because every new group enthralled by the survival challenge risked the same fate, illusions tailored to their darkest secrets, culminating in a test for which no guarantee of survival existed. And so the phone rang on, unstoppable, a clarion of terror for the next unsuspecting circle of friends.